Coming up on Theater Talk.
Stand back! It's a musical! Some musicals are very serious. A musical! It's a musical for us!
Theater Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation. From New York City, this is Theater Talk. I'm Susan Haskins.
And I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post.
So, Michael, it is the 50th anniversary of The Sound of Music.
Yes. Now, Susan, you're old enough probably to have seen it when it first came out, right?
Not only did I see it when it first came out, but I saw it on stage in the First National Touring Company with Florence Henderson, and I was talking to our guest about how I vastly preferred that production and telling him why. So now let's introduce him.
Well, in honor of the 50th anniversary of The Sound of Music, everybody's favorite movie musical, except a few critics, I'm afraid. There's a wonderful new book called The Sound of Music Story by Tom Santopietro, and it's really well-told, engaging, anecdotal history, not only of the movie, but the whole phenomenon of the Sound of Music, the Von Trapp family, the original Broadway production, and what The Sound of Music means in the popular culture. Tom, welcome to Theater Talk.
Thanks for having me on.
And with us is the man who guards all things Rodgers and Hammerstein, without whom I suspect this book could never have been written.
That's correct.
It wouldn't have been as interesting.
That's right. Our old friend Ted Chapin, who runs the Rodgers and Hammerstein organization.
Thanks. Always a pleasure to be here.
Good to see you again, Ted. All right, Tom, so what did you feel, since Sound of Music has been around 50 years, and there have been a lot of things written about Sound of Music, was missing in the story of the Sound of Music that you wanted to put together in this book?
Well, I thought what I could bring to it is that I'm clearly a fan of the film, and starting from when I was 10 years old and saw it and just kind of fell in love with it and with Julie Andrews, like most of the world. But I thought if I combined a fan's approach with a film historian's approach, and I thought that's something that hasn't been done before. So I wanted to talk about Ted McCord, the cinematographer, and Robert Wise, one of the greatest directors we've ever had, and really look at there's so much cultural heft attached to the film now, and strip some of that away and say, this is why the film works. It's just so great. And then tell the anecdotes that everybody likes to hear.
Yeah, well, one of the things I thought was fascinating, I didn't know this, that originally it was Russell and Krauss were going to do a play using folk music, Austrian folk music, and the idea was maybe Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein might write one song in the folk style.
Yeah, it was a Mary Martin vehicle.
Right. Right.
And her husband manager found this German movie about the Trapp family, and they screened it and said, this is a part, Mary, for you. So the Broadway of the 1950s was, okay, let's do a Broadway play for Mary Martin as Maria von Trapp. We don't really want to have an entire Broadway show where they sing madrigals and Austrian folk songs. So perhaps let's ask Dick and Oscar if they can write a tune or two. Dick and Oscar, no fools they, heard the story, had good success with Mary Martin, and said, if you'll wait for us to finish Flower Drum Song, we think there's a musical here, and we're happy to write it with you.
What I found interesting in your book, though, is here, Lindsay and Krauss, big names of Broadway at the time, they come in, they've got this property. All of a sudden, it becomes Rodgers and Hammerstein's. And you get the sense from your book that Lindsay and Krauss feel a little bit kind of muscled aside. What was their reaction to it when it was taken over by R&H?
I think on the Broadway version, because they were veterans, they knew the composer-lyricists, they always get star billing. Yeah. I think it actually, the really frustrating thing for them, my interpretation was when the film was such a phenomenon all around the world, and nobody mentioned that they had structured the story to begin with. And they wrote a letter to the New York Times in December, the year that it came out, and said, does nobody remember that we actually had a hand in this? And I thought, it's always the book writer's plight.
And what I was saying to you, that I felt that there were aspects of the Lindsay Krauss book that I was sad weren't in the movie, particularly the politics, where Von Trapp had a Baroness girlfriend, and he broke up with her because she was a Nazi, not just because oh, he liked this, you
Right.
know, the nun.
nun better.
The babe. Yeah, and I found that a stronger plot point.
Well, I think there would have been, in the film version, the political aspect definitely would have been emphasized more if the original director, William Wyler, had ended up directing the film, because he wanted to have tanks going through
Yo,
the
that was,
square.
I didn't know anything about that. That was fascinating. I mean,
Yeah.
and Kenny, I think you have a quote there that said, you know, it's okay, except why did they start singing? Why did they break out in song as if he has no concept of what a musical is? Ted, was it the biggest movie sale of all time up to that point, The Sound of Music?
I don't think it was. I mean, it was a nice amount of money. It made $1.5 million or something like that. The smart thing about the deal for 20th Century Fox, which is part of why I've had a job for as long as I have, is the deal was to make one movie and exploit it for 10 years. No remakes, no sequels, no life of copyright and any change in the law and any universe that gets created and found and stuff like that. Very, very rare to do that. And it was kind of the confidence of these guys that did that. Because, you know, when, for example, NBC came to us a couple of years ago and wanted to see if they could find an audience for a live television event of entertainment, and they went to The Sound of Music as the one that they thought would be the right one, and, you know, are the rights available? The answer was very simple. Yes, because those rights stayed with the authors.
Oh, so that I realized. So
Yeah.
the movie has the
So,
20th Century
well-
Fox has no claim on the rights to
No,
the
no.
movie?
In failure, it would have been a dumb deal, because if the movie had been mediocre, after 10 years, they would have said, well, just put it in the vault and nobody cares.
Right.
Julie Andrews is on the side of the parking garage on the 20th Century lot to this day. So we've been many times to the table to renegotiate the deal. Fairly, I have to say. I mean, the whole home video, who would have guessed that home video became such an important part of the world and such a really important part of movies like The Sound of Music, because you want to have a copy and you want to show it to your kids when they're cranky on a Saturday, you know, and so from the very beginning of home video, it's been a very, very big seller in that market.
Well, I'm old enough, not quite as old as Susan, who saw the original, but I'm old enough.
You're lost, darling. You're lost.
I'm old enough to remember you saw The Sound of Music once a year, and if I'm not mistaken, it was always at Thanksgiving.
NBC had it, and they sort of played between Thanksgiving and Christmas.
Right.
But it was absolutely sort of like The Wizard of Oz. It was a once-a-year event.
But I remember, as you say, my love for the movie is that there was a real anticipation building up on the way to Thanksgiving or Christmas, because you knew you were going to see The Sound of Music again that year. That was the excitement of it all.
Right.
Tell
And-
them the Reagan story.
Oh, yeah. You know, one of the things that I uncovered is, of course, the fan base is extraordinary for this. Gwen Stefani, it's her favorite movie of all time. Who knew? And, of course, Lady Gaga on the Oscars, which I thought was terrific. But my favorite story is that it was 1983, the Reagan White House. We were hosting the G7 Economic Summit, the only time during the Reagan presidency. And Reagan's strengths being as a communicator, but not as good on the details. They had prepared a briefing book for him, you know, easily digestible. And James Baker, chief of staff, went in the next day and realized the book hadn't been touched. He hadn't cracked it, not moved. He said, Mr. President, you haven't read this. And he said, Jim, how could I have read that? The Sound of Music was on television last night.
Well, that certainly says it all about Reagan. But
That is optimism, it's suddenness,
Yes.
climbing every mountain.
I watched The Sound of Music again this week to prepare to talk to you, and I was struck by how it's the Beauty and the Beast myth with children. That she and in a way, though, I thought, because she goes to the house of the Monster Man and wins him over, and I thought to myself, but how many years is this going to hold up? Many more years where the woman has to win over the mean monster man, where a man can be that abusive and little girls think, oh, that's so romantic, I want to win him over, rather than saying, as I thought when I watched the movie, leave.
This is Sarah
You know
Lawrence
what I mean?
background,
Get rid of
feminist
this guy.
background.
What I would say to you
Yeah.
is I want to hear in 5 years when you watch it again
Yes.
what you take from it. Because somebody just said
I
something.
hope I can think by
Well,
the way.
you can't. Somebody just said something to me the other day which I thought was absolutely fascinating, which is why do kids
Yes.
whose attention span lasts about 10 seconds these days, and when you watch virtually anything, it's like cut. Why do kids sit still and watch The Sound of
Because of
Music?
the other kids.
Well, not only the other kids, but also the theory that I thought was interesting is she's very much like a child. She's in trouble.
Yes.
And she gets out of trouble and gets back into trouble.
Yes.
And keeps getting herself out of
Yeah.
trouble. And maybe there's something that kids kind of respond to in that. So the thing is, I think it's because you can look at it and see different things every
There's so
time
many
you look
different
at it.
things going on.
What I found interesting, though, was your character study of the real Maria von Trapp,
Yes.
who is not like Julie Andrews. I mean, I think in a column I wrote, I said she comes off more like Elaine Stritch than,
You
than
did
Julie.
say that.
And an editor friend of mine at the paper took his daughter up to the Trapp estate in Vermont.
Villa.
Yeah, the villa, and his daughter was in love with the Sound of Music. He said, I'm going to introduce you to the real Julie Andrews. And she came in, and he said, this is the real Julie Andrews. This is the real Maria von Trapp. And the woman looked down at the girl's plate and said, eat your strudel, and walked away. Not friendly at all.
Elaine Stritch, who sold her life story for $9,000 to the movies.
Right.
Well,
Yes,
I
and-
think a comment about just going back for 1 second to what Susan was saying. We're going to call this your feminist interpretation.
Yes, by feminist
I think it's so interesting. The real Maria von Trapp talked about the fact that she fell in love with the kids before she fell in love with the captain.
Right.
And when she met the kids, and she was 20 at the time, and spontaneously one of the children ran up to her and gave her a kiss, and she wrote, it was the first kiss of her life.
Yeah, she'd come from a very
Yeah,
deprived.
a very deprived background that way. And so I think, Michael, then going to your point, I think, absolutely, Maria was she was a lot sturdier than Julie Andrews. She was a big woman. And that's one of the things I wanted to look at is, when you see these movie stars in their quintessential role, the audiences are falling in love really with Julie Andrews. It's not Maria von Trapp. And so, in Funny Girl, they're falling in love with Barbra Streisand. It's not Fanny Brice. So it's that really interesting interplay between the actress, the mythic figure, and the real.
Well,
life.
in your book, from your book, you learned that Maria von Trapp was really the monstrous, overbearing one, and that the Captain von
was
Trapp
kind of a nice, sweet guy.
And they jettisoned the priest who helped put the band together.
Right.
He was just out of the story. But someone said that Maria came to the set and she was a bully.
Some of these get a little blown out of proportion. I think Maria was, my interpretation is this loving woman with a big personality, and she really knew what she wanted.
And a stage mother.
And her granddaughter, and I have this as a little a quote in the book, in the chapter you refer to about the real Maria, and her granddaughter said, my grandmother had dealt with presidents and kings, and I realized even when I was little, she didn't have a lot of time for details. And I thought, that's a really good summing up.
Do we know, did Richard Rodgers like the real Maria von Trapp? Did he have much to do with her?
I'm not sure that there's much documentation of her being around when the guys were writing the show pretty much at all. And I think she was also probably smart enough to go, you're playing me. You're the one I want to have a relationship with.
Right. And how, Ted, did Rodgers and Hammerstein respond to the criticism, both of the Broadway show and of the movie? The Pauline Kaels who dismissed it as this treacly thing with the kittens and puppets and all that sort of stuff. Did that ever bother them, or they? Well,
it was Oscar Hammerstein who wasn't well.
Yeah, he died.
He died 6 months after it opened on Broadway, and in fact couldn't go to New Haven when it was out of town, but did go to Boston. And in Boston, they needed to write a song for the captain at the end, and actually, uncharacteristically, Rodgers had written the music first, and he wrote the lyrics to Edelweiss, which was, it's interesting, it was their last song they ever wrote together, and that's a pretty goodbye song.
Yeah.
But Hammerstein is the one who, when the critics were not nice to the show, and they were nicer to the play than the ones who were nasty were really nasty to the movie.
Yeah.
But Hammerstein is the one who said, we'll be fine. Don't worry about this. This show is fine. It'll do just fine. Don't be upset about this. And he'd been around for many, many years and seen flops and non-flops, and I think he had a kind of wisdom of.
And the show beat Gypsy for the Tony Award, did it not?
It did.
Yes.
And Mary Martin, and Fiorello won the Tony for Best
Mary
Musical.
Martin beat
and Mary
Ethel.
Martin, you can't buck a nun, as Ethel Merman said. And it's interesting. I heard, and maybe on here, Ethel Merman singing. Everything's Coming Up Roses from the original cast album. And it was one of those things where I just heard it and I thought, you know what? That's overbearing. And I
could have been the real Maria von Trapp.
I can now I could sort of understand why the Tony voters may have said, you know what? Ethel, that's a little much, you know. And Mary Martin was magic on stage, we're told. I never saw her on stage, but there was a kind of magic, so who knows?
She wasn't as good as Florence Henderson.
I tell you, Florence Henderson was fantastic.
All right, we have to wrap it up before I get to unwrap my gift from Tom. But I thought you made the case quite well in the book that the score bears a little more thought than we give it. I mean, we know it so well, but Rodgers is doing a lot of interesting things melodically and harmonically, I think, in that score.
Absolutely. I mean, there's the preludium, you know, for in the stage version, that he was really expanding what he had never written music like that before. And I think we know the score so well that everybody sort of thinks, oh, do, re, mi. Well, that's been around 300 years as a little, you know, nursery rhyme. Well, in fact, that was a very deliberate, and even within do, re, mi, he's doing interesting things with the melody. And so I think that's one of the reasons the score resonates so much with people.
Well, I also think you take a song like My Favorite Things, and clearly Miles Davis found a lot in there to
John Coltrane
to famously turn that into a jazz standard. Really.
No, I always think that part of why Rodgers and Hammerstein have lasted is that they're deceptive because they seem simple, and in a lot of ways the emotional basis of their songs is simple, but they're never simplistic. And Rodgers will take you harmonically and melodically a place that you actually don't expect to go, but it keeps your interest. Right. And that's why people may say, "Oh, they're simple songs." They stick with you, and that's the genius of composers and lyricists are putting phrases together that just stick in your craw and you keep them there. And it's a very youthful score for two guys who are in their 60s who have written these. I mean, you might think if you didn't know anything that these were 20-year-old, 30-year-old people writing.
I mean, they're writing a musical about a girl discovering the world.
That's right, and kids, and
And I would just say that I think it's so heartfelt, and I always. If you ever go to a sing-along Sound of Music, with everybody in their crazy costumes, my favorite being the spray-painted gold man who said, "I'm Ray, a drop of golden sun." Right.
I saw a Jew once, a Hasidic Jew, and was asked, "Who are you?" He said, a Jew, to you and you and you."
Very wonderful.
That's a stretch.
But what I can't top that.
Sorry.
But no, that's perfect.
Not
But I think in the sing-along, what you see is so you have all these crazy costumes, and everybody comes because everybody's so ironic today. Everybody looks at the world through the prism of irony. Yeah. And it starts out that way, and by the time you get to Edelweiss, everybody has dropped the irony, and they are singing along, and you can tell it's coming from the heart. And that's a real work of art in pop culture terms.
So that I would say that my objection to the movie when I saw it was that they.
Gloria Steinem, am I right?
No, but going back to that, the ironic song, "There's No Way to Stop It," and what was the other one they did? The Baroness and the.
How Can Love Survive?
Oh, I always liked that song.
The two edgy, ironic songs were cut from the movie, and even when I was practically, a toddler when the movie opened, I missed that edge.
That's what makes the stage production interesting to people, because people who know only the movie, there are enough familiar things that they're happy, but then there are enough different things that they sit there thinking, well, why is she singing this? And then you realize those are the characters who are caught up in the politics and aren't going to leave.
And so it isn't all fluff.
Yeah.
There's a darkness to it, and I wish that had been in the movie, but they made it, all the way to the bank. Rodgers and Hammerstein.
What's the gross of the movie now? Like 1.6 billion or something like that?
I don't know, because where it ranks in gross keeps changing, because you factor in it still pretty much is, Gone with the Wind, The Godfather, The Sound of Music.
Right.
Those are the top three-ish. Right. Don't
now,
hold me to it.
I just want to open my present from Tom, because I gave I thought a kind column about the book.
It certainly was.
Wait, are you allowed to get presents?
Well, no, I am, because
it's after the fact.
The column's already come out, so this is not a bribe. I'm done. I'm finished. The show's over. It's in the can. The column is now floating around there. And Tom very kindly brought me. Not in brown paper packages, tied up in strings, though, I noticed. But,
no, but the wrapping paper almost matches Ted's tie.
Yes, and we did not coordinate that.
Ooh, this is wonderful. Ooh. Styling the Stars. Forward by Maureen O'Hara. What a beautiful book.
And there's a lot of photos from The Sound of Music in there.
Oh, yeah.
And Angela Cartwright from the cast of the film was behind this book. So I thought it would all make sense.
Beautiful. Very handsome book.
Love that Angela Cartwright.
Thank you. Let me know when your next book's coming out. I'll make sure to give it a good write-up in the post. All right. Ted Chapin from the Rodgers and Hammerstein organization, and Tom Santopietro, the author of The Sound of Music story. Thank you very much for being our guest tonight on Theater Talk.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Hi, AndrewAndrew here for Theater Talk at the press preview of Something Rotten.
We're going to find out if we can't find something good about Something Rotten with the cast and creative right now.
Ladies and gentlemen, all the way from Stratford upon Avon, the king of couplets, the sultan of sonnets, the man who put the I am in iambic pentameter. Please put your hands together for the one, the only, William Shakespeare! Thank you!
Is it good to see me or what?
New kingdom for a horse!
Okay. Here's one for all you beautiful tuners out there. A little sonnet that's been very good to me. Let's see if you know it. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?
So this is a show 400 years in the making. Can you tell us a little bit about what you did to prepare for it in much less time than that?
I would say I'm a notorious actor for not doing much research. So I'm really, really pleased that this Shakespeare's a bit of a plagiarist and a bit of a fraud. It's more the rock star Shakespeare. So it's in the hips.
Yeah.
That's the real research.
We were definitely picking up some Tim Curry, some Rocky Horror when we were watching you up there.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
He's an amalgam of many things, and God, that means the world to me. Perfect.
I adore the adoration, though others may appall it. It's quite the new sensation. What shall we call it? I am the will of the people. He is the will of the people. I am the will of the people now. Can you believe it?
The book is so good, and that's what drew me to it. Usually most new musicals, it's great except the book. You hear that all the time. This book is terrific. It's a great story.
And basically, Nick, played by Brian Darcy James, and Shakespeare, who's played by Christian Borle, are rivals, right? The poor bottom brothers, Nick and Nigel, cannot get a break. So it's that damn Shakespeare all the time. He just gets everything.
God, I hate Shakespeare. That's right, I said it. No, I do. I hate Shakespeare. I just don't get it. How a mediocre actor from a measly little town is suddenly the brightest jewel in England's royal crown.
So you've done a lot of Shakespeare, a lot of straight Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Do you feel guilty about attacking the bard in this way?
No, because I celebrate him in the play. I think he's the best.
Right.
I think he's brilliant, so it's easy.
You're like the ultimate Shakespearean fanboy.
Oh yeah, total fanboy, yeah.
I could never hate Shakespeare. I hate to quibble, but you overrate Shakespeare and all his dribble. Oh, you know that he has talent. I'll admit he has a knack for making something out of being nothing but a hack.
You out there being like Shakespeare, you know? And I think
it's a good way to start.
It does, well, and it speaks to the people in the audience who are like, oh, theater.
Yeah.
Nick, Brian Darcy James's character, is just so frustrated with Shakespeare. And so he goes to Soothsayer Alley to find out from a soothsayer what the next big thing is going to be so that he can get there and become a success. So he goes and he finds Nostradamus, not the Nostradamus, but his nephew Thomas Nostradamus. All right, so this is the scene there where Brian meets Brad Oscar, who's playing Nostradamus.
I want you to tell me what the next big thing in the theater will be, what audiences will be lining up to see.
The biggest, most fantastic thing in the theater will be musicals.
What?
Musicals.
What the hell are musicals?
It appears to be a play where the dialogue stops and the plot is conveyed through song.
Through song?
Yes.
So, an actor is saying his lines, and then out of nowhere, he just starts singing?
Yes.
Well, that is the stupidest thing that I have ever heard. You're doing a play, you got something to say, so you sing it? It's absurd.
So a lot of very talented people, you know, working at the top of their craft, and again being led by Casey Nicholaw, who is just so smart, knows this form so well, and is a great actress-director because he was a performer, and he gets it. He knows what it was, and he hasn't forgotten. So he knows how to get the best out of us.
Feel that fascinating rhythm moving to your feet.
What is that?
Feel your ass gyrating to that titillating beat.
You okay?
You slap your
dance. Does it advance the plot? No. Advance character? Not necessarily. Then why do it? Because it's entertaining. 5, 6, 7, 8.
Our thanks to the Friends of Theater Talk for their significant contribution to this production. Theater Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Lowe Foundation, the Corey and Bob Donnelly Charitable Fund, the Noel Coward Foundation, Carrie J. Fries, the Dorothy Strelson Foundation, plus public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs and the New York State Council on the Arts, a state agency.
We welcome your questions or comments for Theater Talk. Thank you and good night.